everyone. I'm Eric Machnes. I'm the Director of Operations at Red Clover, a strategic HR consulting firm based out of Parsippany, New Jersey.
And I am Jen Lestrange. I am the founder and CEO of Red Clover. And we're going to spend a little time talking about some questions that have come our way around HR, all things compliance, and I think today we're talking about transparency.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be a good kind of casual conversation, really not scripted, but give us the opportunity to have a coffee chat over some of the things that we know we're dealing with our small and medium-sized business clients located all across the country. Our questions are scripted, that much I will tell you, but I think the conversation is always going to come natural because these are kind of the things that we talk about around the conference room table anyway, as we try to help our client base navigate a very unique world at work right now.
It is true. And I think what's interesting about this and why we decided to do these videos is so much of the recommendations that we provide really come from all of us getting together around the table, and sometimes we'll reach out to legal counsel for support, but a lot of it's really just like, what was your experience in this state? What did this client do? How did it work? Was everyone happy with the outcome? Did it support the business goals? So
I think you make a really good point about how did you manage that client in that state, because I think it's really important that we talk about New Jersey pay transparency and pay transparency as a whole, because on June 1st, New Jersey is requiring that employers post salary ranges in their job postings. Now, for us, this isn't new, as a number of states across the country, as well as some local towns and municipalities, have required pay transparency for quite some time now. New Jersey is just playing catch up along with Massachusetts and Illinois. And I would imagine, and we talk about this a lot, that I would imagine pay transparency is something that we'll continue to see roll out in other states across the country. Yeah,
I think we use the expression coming to a theater near you soon.
Absolutely.
So if you're not already thinking about pay transparency, you probably should be. So let's start maybe with recruiting.
Okay.
So the big question that I get when people call is like, hey, pay transparency is coming. We don't want to put salary ranges on our job descriptions, but we've been told we have to. How do we do that? Where do you think that conversation needs to start?
I fully believe, as a millennial, that being transparent actually, let me answer your question better. I can understand why CEOs, employers are nervous about sharing compensation for a number of reasons. One, they're worried about the comparison game among their workforce. I would imagine that if they're a consulting firm, they get concerned about the idea of if their clients see the job posting and see what they're paying people, they'll be able to do some quick math and understand if the client believes they're being billed fairly for the work that the individual assigned to their account is doing.
I remember that conversation.
Yes. And I think there's also this idea that salary is this taboo topic. And I think it really comes from the idea that some managers, some CEOs, some employers don't necessarily have this skill set or understanding of how and why they pay people. But once they do that, hopefully then they can develop a skill on how to have the difficult conversations. And I think a lot of the times that's where we come in. Building a business, growing a business, being an employer of choice means at times you have to have the difficult conversations with your employees. And I think a lot of it is being able to rationalize your choice or your decision on how you pay them to make that conversation go a lot easier. And once you have that initial conversation, the rest are easy, but you can't do that unless you have a strong compensation philosophy. So I guess that's what I would ask you is, you've been in this field for a long time. Long enough. Okay, yeah. Why is it important to have a solid, structured, data-driven compensation philosophy?
I mean, it's foundational. So, and it's funny because I think most of the firms that come to us and be like, hey, we've been hiring people just based on what they asked for, so what we would call market-based pricing, but they've never actually defined their salary structure. So they've never actually figured out, if I've got someone who's doing this job over here and they're responsible for, accounts payable, we'll just pick a number. If And then I've got someone over here who's doing HR administration or is a generalist. How do I know, relatively speaking, that these two people are paid equitably relative to their contribution to the firm in very different ways? Salary structure is a way to establish that. Being able to do job benchmarking, understanding your company pay philosophy relative to your competition on the market is also really important. For all of our clients that are all small and medium businesses, I think maybe with one or two exceptions, most of our clients are players that are at or below median as far as their pay philosophy, which basically means that if you take the overall bell curve of where salaries lie from the bottom to the top for a particular job, most of our clients are somewhere in the middle or they're slightly below middle. And a part of that is just the nature of small businesses tend to be slightly lower payers, relatively speaking, to larger firms. And they offer other things that you don't get from a large firm, like access to leadership, educational opportunities, rapid development. They're often fast-growing businesses, so there's lots of career opportunity there. But their pay philosophy is usually a little bit different from what you'll see in a multinational. Then once we've got kind of a pay philosophy established and salary structures established, it's like, all right, where is everybody, right? Like I know you've bumped into some clients where I don't know that we've ever seen a client that hasn't had outliers, where you establish the structures and you've got a few people that are either below where they should be or they're above where they should be. So how do you take that conversation?
I think it goes back to the actual communication and establishing a business case, right? I think anytime, when we approach a change with a company, we're like, what is the business case for doing this and what is the outcome we're trying to achieve, right? And a lot of the times when we see those outliers, the greater question is, does this run afoul of pay equity laws, right? Can this outlier be perceived as being paid differently and therefore treated differently because of being a member of a protected class? It may not be the case. It may just be lack of knowledge of how to pay people properly. But as we know in HR, a lot of the times perception is truth, right? So I think we try to approach it from that arena of how do you make sure that people in the same roles are being treated equitably, not necessarily fairly. Because if a company comes to me and says, well, the reason that person is being paid less is because this is their first job out of school and we are giving them the learning and development opportunities, whereas everyone else in that position came with 2 or 3 years of experience, to me that's a business case as to why that disparity exists, right?
And I think there's something really important about equity versus, it doesn't mean it's the same. It's really looking at what is someone's relative contribution. And experience is a huge role in that. Their ability to operate independently in the job.
And I think even if we go even further back historically, we have a generation of people who ultimately are kind of leading the workforce who were told you never talk salary at work, right?
You mean me?
Right.
You mean like us?
Right. But then you also now have ultimately the NLRB ruling, which has been in place for however many years. It is not legal to ban people to talk about salary at work, right? So if leaders operate from the position of your employees are already talking about how they're compensated, our approach is, why would you as the employer, as the leader, as the manager, not want to get ahead of that conversation?
Great.
And I think that's a lot of the times where kind of the comms comes from. And then when ultimately we discover those outliers, it's okay. It is okay to say to this person, when you offer them a pay increase, and say, listen, we did market research. It has become apparent to us that you are not paid equitably compared to people in the other role. So we're going to make a one-time adjustment to make sure that you are aligned properly with people with the same job and the same level of experience. That's all. And I feel like a lot of the times, the people we work with get very nervous about almost in that case saying, hey, we didn't do necessarily something right. But I think the power is in saying, hey, we're going to fix it and we're going to make sure now that everyone's at a baseline. And there's a lot of power in that, because if you have a strong foundation and you understand how you're paying people, it helps you avoid some of those later conversations when it comes to bonus time, promotion time, pay increase time. it gives you a strong foundation where everyone's kind of on an even playing field. Whereas you know that if that has never existed, it's kind of like the wild, wild west. And people are making arbitrary decisions that they can't rationalize. So what are some key points that you think need to be included in communications about pay changes, pay increases, a rollout of a new, more transparent salary structure?
Ooh, that's a good one. So let me back up for just a second, because I think there's something about what you said where you're doing adjustments for people to bring them in line with, let's say, a salary band range. Personally, in my experience, for what I've seen, mostly with clients, because I think we were pretty early to the game with our own salary structures. And like we had salary structures almost at the same time as we had employees. But for the clients that we see where we support them with the communication, it's like, hey, we're going to make an adjustment to bring you in line with the rest of the organization. This is why, and this is the philosophy, and this is what we're doing. I feel like it creates trust. So sitting someone down proactively and saying, hey, we did this project, we evaluated all of our jobs, this was the outcome, we're making an adjustment because we want to make sure that you feel seen, recognized, valued in the work that you do, and part of that is compensation equity across the organization. And they're like, wow, like that's amazing, they're actually paying attention to this, and they're paying attention to it with some sort of regularity. So they're aware of what's going on in the marketplace, and they're aware, so like, I can rest assured that my company sees me and they recognize, what I'm bringing to the organization. Then when you go into like salary reviews, like the most common one is obviously the merit review, where you're going through and looking at what do we want to do around merit increases related to contribution in the job. So not promotional increases, but just that annual salary review. And usually when we're doing the education to the workforce, the first conversation is, okay, how do we build merit increase, like funding? How do we fund that pool? And it starts with the profitability of the business. And if you've got this underlying foundation of these are our salary structures, this is how we are recognizing our people in an equitable way internally to the organization and checkpointing it externally to make sure that we're meeting our pay philosophy goals externally. Now we're doing a merit review. This is where we stand as a business as far as the profit that's left over. This is what we've earmarked for research. This is what we've earmarked for future acquisitions, whatever you're doing with that profit. But like, this is what we've put in to reward our people. And it is generally articulated as a percentage of total payroll. So if your payroll's $1 million and you're saying my yield is 4%, I'm going to allocate 4% of my $1 million to distribute out. And then it's creating these rubrics where we're evaluating contribution to the job relative to someone's position in the salary structure. So what tends to happen is if we've got someone who is lower in a salary band, meaning that they might be below the target midpoint for that pay range, they may proportionally get a larger percentage increase compared to someone who is already sitting above that median salary structure. And that becomes very, very easy to articulate that difference, because we're also at the same time saying this is your increase, you got your sitting at your 4%, and your new comp ratio in your salary band is X. And people know, they're like, okay, now I know where I sit. I'm 18 months into the job and I'm now at 95% comp ratio and the target is 100% of the midpoint. That makes sense. And it just reinforces that trusting relationship between employer and employee.
What do you say to employers, and again, you kind of mentioned it, is you are very open at Red Clover, you have a very clear salary structure, you're very open about...
pretty much public.
And that's hugely beneficial. It's something that you've always approached with no fear, but I also would argue that you don't completely open all the books, right? How do you help, or what would you say to other CEOs and founders who are worried that what we're asking them to do, what these laws are asking them to do, is be completely 100% transparent at all times with the finances as it relates to the business, especially when a lot of these CEOs and founders, some of it is really tied to their own personal finances.
It's certainly true for me, right?
What is that line between reasonable transparency and still feeling confident that a CEO owner can really just protect some of the required privacy of running a business, I guess you would say?
And I don't know, like, nothing's required. Every CEO makes their choice as to how open they want to be with the finances of the business. Right. And that's a function of their culture, it's a function of the workforce, it's a function of the owner's own comfort with financial conversations. I'll speak from like the perspective of running this business. I'm pretty transparent, but I'm not transparent about everything, as you know. I'm comfortable with people knowing where we are in terms of sales, knowing where we are as far as client growth, knowing where we are as far as general profitability targets, and how close we are to achieving those targets. So everyone knows, are we hitting target, are we above target, are we below target, and we communicate that pretty regularly. Here's what I don't do. So I don't think anyone out there knows what I make. Like they might be able to speculate, but they don't know because I don't share that directly. The other thing that I think we exercise a certain amount of discretion in is when we're doing the year-end organizational bonuses. And you know, we've got a number of different items of variable pay, some of which are very numbers driven. Like it is like, depending on hitting this number at this time with this structure, you will or you will not get a particular bonus or a particular variable pay component, which we can talk about another time if you want. For the year-end bonuses, it's like, all right, here's our total profit. What do we want to do with some of that money? And as you know, we earmark some of it for future hires. So we're very good at retaining a certain amount of cash in the business for growth. There's also, what do we want to do around all the infrastructure stuff? Like we've just moved into new office space. That was a bit of a lift. We're looking at some of our tech acquisition and our software. We did a lot of software acquisition in the last year. And so we had to peel off some of that money to make sure that we had enough cash in the budget to pay for it. And then there was like, all right, what do we want to do about retirement planning? So we do deferred profit sharing. It's something that I believe very strongly, and it's also something that I use to contribute to my own retirement planning as someone who was kind of late to the entrepreneurship game. So we do that, and we balance that against our organizational budget. And then what we do is we'll determine, okay, what would be our target yield based on everyone's target percentage for org bonus, and then we look at where we are relative to what we have retained for the business, and we determine what that is. The team will get a communication around, we exceeded, met, or did not meet our overall profitability targets, and our yield is X percent of the total pool, like we have 100% of the pool available, or we have 80% of the pool available. They don't know how we got to that number. And those decisions really stay with the leadership team, where it's like, okay, what do we want to do here? How much do we have to work with? So they know enough to know that it was thought through. It was done in line with our overall performance, so it hasn't been done at their expense. And it is done in line with our overall philosophy around how we reward people, and we are very variable heavy, so I do try to make sure that we do the right thing there. And they know that it's distributed equitably. Like the distribution from one person to another as far as who gets what, it is a very thoughtful process. I don't want to say it's entirely, like there's a certain amount of subjectivity to it, I think, where we look at someone's performance over the year, but it is very considered, and it is very like, okay, these are the things that this person achieved over the year, and this is why we feel that they deserve more, or this person's maybe moved into a new role or taken on a new challenge, and they still need some time to grow into it, and they've had some additional support, and maybe they get a little bit less because they're still growing into a new role. I think ultimately it comes down to being able to communicate it in a way that's open and honest, so that people feel that they're being treated, what's the right word? I keep using the word equitably, but I think there's something about that they have trust in the process.
Yes, and that in some ways we recognize their value, and I think a lot of what comes from that too is I think it helps it's in and of itself a professional development opportunity, because it helps people who normally wouldn't understand how a business runs understand some of the decisions that ultimately go into the ability to pay people, right? And if I feel like a lot of the people that we work with, we kind of try to help them understand that transparency absolutely helps you build that trust. Because the ability to say to your workforce, hey, yes, we had a really successful year. And hey, maybe the vice president, you saw they got a new car. right? Or you know they go on a nice vacation because they're very open about it, right? Yes, the company was successful, but among the workforce, maybe the reason why your bonus wasn't as big this year or your increase wasn't as big this year was, one, your increase last year was bigger, and that was part because we had more money to play with. Well, and then you're able to answer the question, well, why did we have more money to play with this year? Well, if you'll recall, we invested in a new software system, we had to buy 3 new vehicles for the company, and that ultimately fed into it. So I think the ability to be honest about how the business runs and where the business's money is going, both outside of salary, but also with salary, it's actually not that scary of a conversation to have if you have this skill and ability to really explain how the business is impacted by different economic factors, different salary factors, and things like that. So I think there's some good value there in investing your people in the process and how you are growing the business, or how any CEO is growing the business, because that establishes trust. And it means when you say to them, hey, your raise isn't as big this year because of X, Y, and Z, they believe that what you're telling them, and they're like, okay, that makes sense, because I've seen the bonus, or I've seen the benefit of having that new software, or I'm one of the people who received the new truck because the truck that I was driving was on its last legs. And I think that is one of, I think, the things that people can consider the value of being transparent in pay and how the business operates and how you pay your people without having to completely open the ledger for everyone to read.
Yeah. I'll add one more thing there because it occurred to me as you were saying it. Just because we are sharing information with people, one, we can decide how much detail. I think that's something that's important, where sometimes it's a more general comment as opposed to getting super specific about where the money went. But one thing that, and it's popped up with me a couple of times over the years, it doesn't mean that it's open for conversation.
Also very true.
Right? We are communicating a decision that has had an impact. We're not inviting people to armchair navigate how they think we should have spent the money or the decisions that we've made. And I think that is sometimes something that CEOs, particularly small business CEOs, will struggle with. But but I don't want to have this ongoing debate about the fact that I had to buy a new truck because, we had 150,000 miles on the truck and it was time to change the truck. It's like, it is not a democracy.
It is a benevolent dictatorship.
At times.
I mean, that reminds me of one of the first clients I worked with and did kind of helped them relook at their salary structure, because one of the challenges they were having is everyone would just kind of come to them throughout the year and say, oh, I'm starting a family, or I'm running into this issue. In order for you to keep me, I need more money. And simply put, they would just throw money at the problem, right? But that's kind of why they came to us. They said, hey, we need support. And I remember the first time I sent out the correspondence to everyone around the review time after we had done the salary structure work, and we decided we were going to communicate increases in percentages. Which blew their workforce's mind, right? So then I sent the emails out. I thought they knew I was sending the emails out. Apparently leadership didn't know, but they immediately kind of got some blowback from members of the team.
Blowback or questions? Was it more a curiosity thing, or it was
it was curiosity, but it was also hi, I want to talk about this.
Okay.
One, I think they were kind of shocked that, and part of that too is that ultimately we worked really hard to remove or separate performance management from salary discussions at the end of the year. So that was also a new change for the company, because what would happen is the individuals would go into performance management ready to negotiate an increase. And we were really trying to alter that behavior. And I remember one of the individuals emailing me back, but they had also CC'd leadership and said, I'd really like to talk about this. And that was the other thing. I was open to have the conversation. Leadership was starting to panic a little bit. And my response was, fine, when you're back, because they were away at a conference, let's put a meeting on the calendar. But at the end of the day, we're not changing the amount that you've decided on. We're ultimately just providing the rationale and highlighting what this means for that individual. And then that's that.
How was that conversation? How'd it go?
It was good because I was able to prep leadership who had never had that conversation before. And at the end of the day, the individual didn't leave the organization. Sure, he may have left the meeting, felt like maybe things had changed, but sometimes change is difficult. And I think we were able to highlight to that individual specifically, one, how does he interpret percentage into actual dollars for him? Because I think that was what they were used to, is, oh, this is the dollar increase you're getting. And for people, the dollars and cents sometimes make a lot more sense than percentages. As a non-math person, I can appreciate that. But then I think we were able to highlight to him, be like, as an FYI, you are probably one of the highest increases that we were able to award this year. So understand that we recognize your efforts, but comparably to the organization as a whole, you are on the higher end of what we were able to provide to the workforce. So, and again, I think part of it is, and what we do is we prepare those managers, CEOs, founders on having those difficult conversations, and that's ultimately the value that I think we bring to the table. Like, this is all.
What do you think makes the conversation difficult for the owner?
I think some of them are probably really good at running their business and are very, very intelligent about how to grow the business in the way that they want. They're also probably very skilled in like the technical area of what their business is selling, right? If you're a commercial roofer, you know how to commercial roof. Yeah. If you are an IT expert, you know how to code, you know how to manage multiple devices. If you are a PR maven, you know how to sell your clients in earned and paid media, right? That is a skill set. I think sometimes HR is also a skill set. And I think it is when someone decides to build a small business, the difficulty comes with, oh crap, I actually have to manage people. People come with emotions, and if you've been a solopreneur, when you were doing this by yourself, no one's questioning your choices or decisions.
That is true. And then I get this guy.
Right. Who's always like, Jen, hold on. And I think that's what happens, is when you decide to actually build a team, all of a sudden you're considering, yes, I know how to run a business, but now I'm also running a business that's impacting other people. And how do you make sure you're growing people in a way that means that you're going to have difficult conversations? And it may not be about salary, right? There's all these different times of how do you manage someone who comes to you and says like, my job is overwhelming me. And in some people's heads, it's like, this is not what I signed up for. And there's a lot of different, what is the person, has the CEO ever had to have this difficult conversation before? Are they worried about the outcome, right? Like, we're all human, and we don't like to hear no. So how do you deal with an employee who says, no, that's not an acceptable answer for me? And they could be your most valuable employee, and you don't want to lose them, but you also don't want to break the bank of the business. So there's a lot of different factors that come into it. And I just think some people have not had the opportunity to really be able to manage those discussions. And we know through all our work with DISC assessments and things that some people take conflict more personally.
Yes.
Some people go into conflict ready to win and ready to fight. And like at the end of the day, like, does that their ability to be, or their natural tendency to be direct and say, this is my decision, live with it, how does that ultimately impact the person sitting across the desk from them? Yeah. So I just think it's a skill that some people just haven't had exposure to, but once you kind of do it, it gets easier and easier. And like you said, it's okay being confident in the fact that you are running a benevolent dictatorship rather than a democracy. And that can be really hard, especially as you're trying to grow your business beyond 1 or 2 employees. Yeah. And sometimes that difficult conversation means that person's going to look elsewhere. Yeah. And that is okay.
That's okay. Doesn't mean they're necessarily going to leave.
Right.
Interesting. Maybe to wrap it up, can we maybe do some quick hit questions back and forth?
Oh gosh,
I haven't really thought about this.
Rapid fire?
Yeah, some sort of rapid fire.
Like fun rapid fire, or like business rapid fire?
No, like fun.
Okay, I'll let you start. I don't know. Okay.
What is your strongest positive memory as an employee related to compensation?
So I think it's when I had the opportunity to recognize someone's contributions in a way that the amount of their bonus as well as their increase was a true reflection of the work that they had done the past year.
So it was for someone who you were supervising.
Yes, and being able to really communicate to them and say, listen, like I really acknowledge, and it's happened more than once, right? We really acknowledge what you've done. You've really helped support the company and its growth. So at the end of the day, based on our evaluation, you've really earned I don't want to say outsized, but a relatively large,
really solid.
Really generous increase to your pay as well as a bonus because we recognize your contributions.
Yeah.
And as someone who came from higher education, where that never happened, and also being at the receiving end of those conversations as well, like for us, it was always a 2% increase year over year, right? Cost of living. And there was always this promise of your performance will ultimately contribute to your end of year compensation increase. And that just never came to light. So actually being able to say, you did this, you earned this, I'm happy to recognize this for you, was really, really good, and kind of to spread the love, right? To pay it forward, because you and I have had very similar conversations early in my career. So I think that's been a huge bonus, and also doing it at clients too, because I think some of the individuals we work with at client sites, once we kind of roll out the salary transparency and we actually help the employee understand, it clicks for them, and then they're grateful. It makes their boss look good. Like the work that we do, at the end of the day, if they're going to the CEO's office and saying, thank you, I knew this was the place that I wanted to work because we guided them in making a strong compensation decision and developing a salary structure, that's huge for us. And then I think it helps the CEO connect some of the hard work we did for getting them to face some truths about the salaries in their company. They actually connect it to, oh wow, maybe the Red Clover team was right, because now I have a lot of happy employees. And being open and honest wasn't that difficult.
Interesting. What would you say is the number one thing that a small business owner can do to start down the path of pay transparency? Assuming that they're doing nothing today, what's the first step?
I think it's honestly like it's run an employee census, right? Actually look, download it from a payroll provider and look at what you're paying people, right? Look at the titles, look at how long you've worked with them, really understand the role, right? Because it's not necessarily about the person.
That takes some time, right?
But really just download your census and look at the numbers. Like, do they make sense? Right?
There's a gut check there first before you even do the benchmarking, right?
Like just take the time to really sit and be like, all right, let's actually look at what I pay people, and does this make sense, right? Like kind of, and again, like you can maybe take into consideration the person who's doing the job, but again, we always try to go to like the role, right? But really look at it, understand the context with which you hired the person, with the extent to which they've been at the company, and really just look at that salary column and be like, does this make sense? And I think that's always kind of the step in the right direction. And I think if there's that self-reflection, even if you're looking at that census, and if you're lucky enough to have like salary history, like maybe you look at that person who consistently has gotten, anytime they ask for raises, why do we keep giving it to them? And then actually understand, and that might give you a good idea to say, okay, this is outsized compared to everyone else in the organization. What is different about this person and everyone else? And there's that certain kind of maybe gut check that you're giving yourself of like, maybe this isn't the best approach, because to be fair, we have other people who are performing just as well as this person.
They're just not asking.
Just because they never ask for it doesn't mean that they shouldn't. And the person who you've given raises because they always ask for it could be really great at their job, and that's fine. And you're like, yeah, absolutely, you deserve more money for what you're doing. But how does that impact everyone else in the organization who doesn't ask?
From an equity perspective, that's really good. Okay, cool.
For you, I mean, this is kind of on here, but what would someone do? So we talked a lot about, okay, when you have knowledge of the jobs that you're looking at what already exists. What's one thing someone can do if they're bringing a completely new job to market?
Okay, so brand new job hasn't been calibrated in the organization yet. I think There's benchmark data that's available publicly, like you can go, and there's a lot that's available for free, like you've got salary survey data that's available on most of the sort of social media and job related platforms. I think a word of caution, one, just because the job title is the same doesn't mean that the job is the same. And I use some examples where you can get a vice president title in a multinational organization and it is nowhere the same job as a vice president in a small, retail operation, for example. So beware of job titles. I think there's something about looking at what are the key responsibilities of the job role, so the essential functions of the job. What is it that's absolutely required? What am I going to market for? And what do I really feel that the skill set is that I need to fill that role? And then look at kind of a range of job titles to kind of get is there a point of central tendency around this that kind of makes sense around the knowledge, skills, and experience that I need for the right candidate to come into this job role? And then sometimes there's all right, let's talk to a few people and see what they say and kind of gut check. Also, when we're doing it for clients, and I'm probably not the best person to ask this question of, but I know from talking with the team, they're sometimes we'll put a few candidates in front of someone the first time they're going to market with a role and be like, is this right? This is what I think you said you needed as far as the right candidate based on the job description that we wrote. This is where I think it lands. This seems to match the initial salary budget that we've put behind it. Does that work? Or do we need to adjust it? Is it too experienced? Is it not experienced enough? And that can be a great gut check where it's all right, we can refine what it is that looks like. I will say that sometimes we have bumped into cases where sometimes because it's the first time they've gone to market with a job role, sometimes they are rescoping a role that exists in the organization, but they're not necessarily ready to fully talk about what that's going to look like internally in the organization because there's some big reorg coming.
Sure.
They might source for the role and not post for it, right? So identify that avatar candidate and then reach out to them and start to have the conversation before they've actually established a salary budget and try to establish some market-based pricing before they land on where that role needs to be. That can be very valuable, particularly in small businesses where they don't have enough data internally to extrapolate and be all right, if we're bringing in for the first time an HR director, right? Let's say they want to go to market for HR director, it could be any whatever director level role. We've never done that before. We're this size organization with this kind of scope of budget. Let's go talk to a few people that have done that and find out where they're at, and then we can kind of regroup and figure out okay, does this make sense? Is it really the right time for us to do this? Because sometimes it's oh, we didn't realize it was going to be a $200,000 job or whatever it is. Maybe we need to regroup and do this a little differently. So I think sourcing can be really helpful too, as opposed to just direct posting and seeing what you get.
Yeah, and then I think finally for me as a CEO founder, what is the one benefit you've seen by being reasonably transparent about how you pay people?
Tangible retention.
Okay. Yep.
Right? I think that our ability to have really good conversations with people, even when the comp isn't where they wanted it to be, but that they are confident that it is equitably distributed, so to speak, that has been huge for our culture and our retention. Because everyone understands all right, this is what I need to do to get to the next level. It's clear, I know the goalpost, I'm just going to run for the goalpost. And that just makes everything easier. I talk about it, I would people could get together over coffee and put their pay stubs on the table and I'd be okay, that's cool. Have fun with it.
I mean, and you I think the other thing obviously you've done is, kind of the total reward statement, and that's a whole other conversation, but it's also helping people recognize that, obviously your take home pay is part of it, but there's so many other things that ultimately factor into your overall compensation and how the company supports you financially. And again, that's a huge part of the whole pay transparency, right? It's helping people understand this is the whole thing, and this is where it adds up. And also we do it over time. Right. I show people year over year, this is where you were 3 years ago, and this is where you are now, and this is how that has evolved over time. And they really see it it's a bar chart. It's kind of cool. I like it. All right, I think that is all we have to say about
That's
pay
probably longer than we thought.
transparency. That's okay.
Hopefully people manage through the end.
Listen, I mean, I would love to spend coffee time with me just because I'm so charming and amazing and sparkling personality. No, I think this is great. I think this is awesome. We appreciate anyone who has taken the time to take part in this coffee chat with us. This will be a semi-regular series as long as Jen and I can continue to get our acts together. And yeah, I mean, if this is a topic of interest to you, if you're not sure how to begin the conversation, feel free to reach out to one of us, and we're happy to talk to you and potentially get you connected to one of our consultants to begin the salary transparency journey.
It's coming soon.
Yep. All right.